This is Kingdom Kommerce, and today's episode starts now.
So let's dive into our discussion about when is the appropriate time to dismount, when you should dismount, if you should dismount. Hopefully you shouldn't have to, but this is a reality.
Especially with startups. There's a reason, I think Scott had mentioned in one of our first episodes, 90% fail. So do I have to wait till the last bitter day, or were there early indicators where I could have gotten out and moved on to something else? That's what we're going to hopefully unpack.
In season 1, you mentioned you experienced, you call it a bloodbath, where it didn't go the way that you had anticipated. I was wondering if you could kind of maybe tell us a little bit about how, why, what happened, and kind of what made you decide, okay, and now's the time to pivot or dismount.
So it's classic entrepreneurial thinking in that you kind of have this picture, right? Oh, I've got this idea and it's going to be huge and we're going to fly to Saturn and touch the rings of whatever, and like everything's going to go smooth and hunky-dory, and it doesn't, right? And it could be a number of different things. In our case, I was convinced people wanted it, and even some of the early research suggested that people were like, yeah, we have that need. So then we went and built it and invested and created and all that. And then when it was time for them to actually write the check, they weren't writing it fast enough. We talked about impatience, right, in our previous episode. So we were impatiently selling, but the results weren't coming in fast enough. Meanwhile, in anticipation of all the big orders, we had hired people. We had taken over office space. We went and made a bunch of impulsive, silly decisions, right? So when the money wasn't coming in, but the money was going out like to the tune of 10x, it's only a matter of time before you can't make payroll, right? Or you can't pay that bill, or you're slow paying a vendor, or whatever it is, and that gets worse and worse and worse. And then because the entrepreneur, in this case me and my partner, we were just like holding on, like this kung fu death grip on, like, no, we're going to make it work. We could get that phone call tomorrow, right? There's three big orders. We have 3 big whales in the pipeline. And if just one of them say yes, all our problems are gone. We're like, so let's roll the dice one more time. Roll it again. Let's see how next Friday goes. Let's borrow the money to make this payroll, and like, we'll be fine. We've got 2 more weeks to close the deal. And if you've ever felt versions of that in a startup, you know what I'm talking about. And I think but the only problem is it just gets worse and worse and worse. And the whales get like further and further away. And like, now you can't even hear the whales anymore. Like usually you can hear whales underwater. Like, no, I can't even hear the whales. I think they've migrated to Africa. They're gone. But then you're still like, but then another whale may come over and like get lost and wander into our waters. They don't wander into your waters. It's just every indication says time's up. The sand is run out of the hourglass, but the entrepreneur is like,
yeah,
I'm going to make it work.
So then what might be some checkpoints or some like really big mile indicators where it's like, okay, it might be smart for you to like think about stopping or like divesting or like pulling back if you see it happening?
Because there's the other side where it's like, if you just persevered,
That's
you were
right.
just
That's
strong,
it,
if you just had the will,
Yeah.
you would have made it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
right.
there's like that side of like that.
How do you
culture.
balance those two, right? And this goes back to things we talk about in our other episodes about like having good counsel and having advice and guidance and knowing your numbers and watching your data and saying, okay, we predicted it was going to cost us X to get a customer. How are we doing? We predicted we'd be cash flow positive in month 6. It's now month 64, like looking at data. Those are all things that would tell us the truth, right? Data doesn't lie. But in the absence of that, we can persevere in the wrong direction. And like Ecclesiastes says, you're like punching in the wind, trying to grab sand in your hand and it's just gone. So that's kind of what happens. So to your point, to your question about what are some checkpoints, what are some things to look for, right? One of them would be your own passion. Where's your passion for the startup and the business? If that's waning or it's not really there, wait for the next one. Just because you had an idea doesn't mean it's the idea. How passionate are you about it? In our previous episode, we talked about, are you willing to go 2 years with no food on your table, so to speak, and not $1 of profit to put in your bank account, and all your credibility on the line? Are you willing to do that for this business? If so, keep going, persevere. If not, why persevere through that? You won't even be really persevering. You'll be half-assing it anyway.
So in season 1, we talked about Bozzy, right? And we talked about the O, which is the opportunist. Now, the opportunist, as you described, he jumps around.
Yeah.
The next shiny object, he's on it.
Yeah.
You know, so what would you say to an opportunist? Because I think this, in his or her scenario, this could be like almost dangerous to them because they could just go from idea to idea to idea. What would you say to an opportunist to caution them before quickly dismounting and going on to the next idea?
Yeah, I think it's back to look at the data, right? Is everything trending the right way? Is it just a matter of I'm being impatient? We projected it would take so long to get this. If it's going well, keep going. Just because something sexier showed up doesn't mean it's time to jump. And that's usually what happens with the opportunist is something with flashier lights shows up and you're like, oh, I'm in a Honda of a business opportunity and someone just pulled up next to me in a Ferrari. Oh my gosh, Ferraris are better than Hondas. I'm gone, right? That's impulsive, that's stupid, and the Proverbs are full of warnings against that. But if the Honda is like falling apart and the wheels are broken and the engine's blowing up, get in a rickshaw if you have to. Just get off the Honda because it's dead. And that's where you have to be able to discern through it. So one of the tips would be passion. Another one would be prospect feedback. Before you even have customers, you have prospects, right? So you're going to do your market research. If you're doing lean startup, you're going to just go do interviews. What's their feedback? You may think it's the greatest idea ever, but if you talk to 100 people and it's not pretty compelling yeses, do you really need to persevere past that, or is it time to pivot or get off?
So in your experience, were you trying to pivot and pivot and pivot to keep the business alive? Or were you just going in one lane, I'm going to make this thing work until you had to jump off?
In the early part of our bloodbath, we were pivoting. Oh, well, if they don't like blue widgets, we'll make red widgets, right? Or like if they don't want it this way, we'll do it that way. But at some point, as you go push further and further past that, pivoting isn't it anymore because now there's only one lane left. It's kind of like being on a highway, like in a big city. There's lots of off ramps. Every mile there's an off ramp. But then when I'm driving towards Cedarville, like I could miss an exit and go 10 miles to find the next exit, right? You just start running out of options and running out of exits. And that's when it gets to desperate mode, which is where we got to, where a pivot wouldn't have helped. We were just in the wrong lane. We were just out of cash. And like, it didn't matter. We wouldn't even have the money to pivot. We were upside down, tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And at that point, pivot isn't the answer. It's dismount.
So when I think of biblical principles, what comes to mind is humility.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in it? Humility, and then the opposite of that, which is pride, right? Did you find that perhaps pride or the lack of humility can be a problem in your entrepreneurial journey when it's time to dismount, but you want to keep going? Because when I think of that, I think your reputation is on the line. The people that believed in you, you're going to let them down. How do you work through that stage and getting over that and being humble enough to say, all right, this is not the path that God has for me?
Why do you think God allows bloodbaths? It is to humble us, right?
Time to learn.
The reason the bloodbaths happen is because we did get too proud, or you got too proud, or too caught up, or you idolize the business, or you idolize the success, or your reputation, and oh man, those people bet on us, and we'll make payroll somehow, no matter what, because then they'll look at us as their heroes, right? All kinds of weird stuff goes in your head, and Satan's happy to kind of push his buttons to do his thing. So yeah, all those are true. And the further along you go, the longer you push the dismount away, the worse it gets. But there's usually pretty good signs ahead of time, months, if not years in advance, that it's time to dismount. We talked about passion, prospect feedback. There's a couple more I'll run you through. But yeah, it's pride that keeps us past those discernment points. And usually, it wasn't just that the writing was in the sand. Like, people were letting you know. Customers were letting you know. Your spouse was letting you know. Your close friends were letting you know in the most subtle way they could. We just ignored them. We were like, yeah, I see the yellow sign and the orange sign, but I know better.
So what if I'm in like the early stages of a possible dismount? Things still look like they're going good, and there is the possibility for it to grow, but I see one of these markings in the sand.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, don't look at any one of them. Really, multiple of these have to be kind of red lights, right? Your passion is waning, or it was never really there in the first place. Prospect feedback wasn't really great, but you forced your way through. Like 3 people said yes and 40 people said maybe, and you still launched the business, right? Then when you got into the market traction really wasn't there. Yeah, again, 3 people bought, but 40 said no. And you're like, oh, well, the 3 bought, and all we need is the whale to show up and then we'll be great. That's just bad stewardship. And so the signs were there, but we were kind of ignoring them, the warning signs, or cash flow, right? The cash isn't coming in fast enough for how we're spending or need to spend. And we go past checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2. Oh, let's borrow. Oh, let's do a line of credit. Oh, let me mortgage my house. Oh, let me do this. Oh, let me do that. So you're passing the warning signs. It's not just one warning sign. There's multiple warning signs that you're ignoring. That's when it gets kind of out of hand. But it's almost like looking at your car. If one indicator light goes off saying your tire pressure is low, you're still going to keep driving. It's something you need to get checked out, but fine. But then like 5 miles later, check engine light comes on. Then the oil light comes on. Then like things start beeping and all. Okay, you're just an idiot at this point to say, oh, I got to make it to Cedarville tonight. Versus, look, we're just going to pull over and do something different. I think that's a good analogy for what happens to us as entrepreneurs. We get blinded and we're not watching the indicator lights, and then bad things happen. And one of the biggest indicator lights for those of our viewers who are married is spousal feedback. When we start ignoring our spouse's concerns and kind of warning signs, and they're trying to do it as subtly initially, and eventually they're not so subtle about it, well, at that point, you're just a freaking idiot, because literally, potentially, God is using them and others to communicate to you, and you're like, I got my patent, so and I put the patent fees on a credit card, and now we just need another $100K to go. It's just silly. Just dismount.
So I almost think that we're talking to the type of individual that's type A, that can withstand a lot of stress. But I also think there's the other side. I think maybe as many people who they have a hard time persevering.
Yes.
So the first challenge comes up and they're like, well, that's God telling me I got to hop off and start something new. What would you say? Where's that balance? Because you hear how perseverance and doing the hard thing, we talked about 2 to 3 years of hard work. How do you know if it's just hard work and you're going to get to the other side, or this is gonna be catastrophic if I continue on?
Good question, Luke. Let's see what your thoughts are on that, or what advice you'd have for him. But I would say it still comes back to, what are the indicator lights saying? And if all the indicator lights are okay, and things are going okay or even good, but they're not going great, persevere and get great. How much of our lack of success is just my laziness or my lack of knowledge, or because I didn't hire high quality people, or I just didn't bust butt, right? If any of those are true, I should persevere and fight on. But if we've given it our all, my best, your best, the best resources, the best everything, and it's still not working, that's where it's like, okay, at this point, I could just persevere and there's nothing that's going to change the result. Right? And that's where I think you have to kind of make some hard decisions. But you're right. There's a lot of us who get a little lazy early, or we don't like rejection, right? And we were raised in an environment where rejection, a little bit snowflakey. And so like the first time the door gets slammed in your face by an investor or a buyer, you're like, oh no,
Right.
like, okay, well, grow up and take some rejection, because welcome to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So those are where we have to kind of pull our big boy pants up and go.
I think the way that I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like when you're starting to harm the people you love, that to me is a really good indicator. Like, like you said, your spouse.
Yeah.
If your spouse is like, this is not a good idea. This is hurting our relationship, or your friends. Like you said, the wise counsel that you have. To me, that seems like that might be a good indicator.
Another good indicator is I'm glad you mentioned hurting the ones you love, because a lot of young entrepreneurs typically will start their business in their 20s, maybe their early 30s, which is usually around the time they're getting married and making babies. And let's say the indicator lights are kind of not so good, and you're like, but I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this so my kids, will have a great future. And so you're going out, beating your head against the wind in something that probably isn't the right fit. Meanwhile, you're missing out the most precious years of your kid's life. You will regret. My goodness, I know so many entrepreneurs who were very successful and very unsuccessful, who basically gave away those precious years chasing after a business when they should have been where they really belonged, right? And God allows you to go do that, and then he lets you look back and go, oh my gosh, I don't even know my kids, So what's the price of that? So that's where I would say it's so important to make sure that all the indicator lights are going well. They don't have to all be perfect, but persevere when it makes sense to persevere. But if not, just to say I'm an entrepreneur, or just to say I won, or just to prove my dad that I'm a hard worker are not reasons to keep persevering at the cost of family, at the cost of your credit rating, at the cost of market opportunity, because your talent could have been used to start a totally different business or go work a job and make money for your family. Those are all the reasons to do it.
So then ways that I can go ahead and help benefit myself, regardless of if this is something that takes off as a business or ends up being something where I have to disengage and take a step back, reevaluate, go into a different industry, go work for someone else and provide for my family. In that way, I should really be surrounding myself with people who can tell it to me straight.
And be submitted to the Lord through the whole journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
When tough times come and it's time to persevere, are you on your knees asking the Lord for guidance through that? And are you listening for and feeling his kind of the wind in your sails? There have been times we've been flat broke, but we felt the Lord's wind in our sails. We just felt encouragement. The most random text would come from someone with a Bible verse. Like someone would preach a sermon on a Sunday morning, and it was like the perfect sermon, all confirming that, okay, this is just a season. But then there's other times where like all the warning lights are like dismount, 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 dismount. The sermon at church, the text from your friend, your spouse's attitude, the bank account balance, the amount of credit card debt, and we're ignoring it all, right? That's where you have to go. Where am I submitted to the Lord in my business? It's his business, not mine. I'm just called to steward it for a window of time. So have I made this an idol now where winning is everything and I'm ignoring all the dashboard? Or am I stewarding well where I can give an account where God goes, you took 5 and turned it into 10, well done. Or you took 5 and you buried it for all intents and purposes, acting like an idiot. This is an utter failure.
Really good.
I'm interested to unpack this with Scott when he joins us.
Oh, for
he's
sure.
going to have a lot to say. So let's go to that part of our talk and invite Scott and unpack this all together one last time.
Well, we'll be right back, guys.
All right, guys, we're back, and this time we have Scott with us. Scott got to hear and watch what we were bantering about. And so, Scott, just quick initial, what were your thoughts as you were listening to us talking?
I had a lot of thoughts, and it was a great conversation. So many nuggets that you guys were sharing. But, one of the, I think biggest takeaways for me is, your tribe, or whether it's your spouse or friends, family, whoever it is, and their opinions of what you're doing, how you're doing it, their buy-in, and what some of those red flags are. So I'm interested to kind of even unpack that a little bit more and see, Joe, from your experience. I'm happy to share some of mine, but from your experience, what does that look like? You're married, I know your wife is involved to a degree. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and before I give that answer, Cooper, as you were hearing you and me interacting on that topic of the red flag of spouse or someone really close to you, right? Are they sending you a red flag that says it's time to dismount, and there's other red flags as well? What was kind of processing through your mind?
I think there's going to be seasons of busyness. There's going to be different seasons in life where you're going to have to make sacrifices, and I think that's, your spouse is the most important person to you in the whole world, and so you have to make sure that they're on board with it and listen to their concerns and really understand, is this red flag, is this something that's seriously going to affect our relationship? She knows me more than anyone else in the world. She can see how this is affecting me. Is it worth pursuing and persevering, or is it worth dropping it and doing something else?
And he used a good word, seasons. Because if you're busy for a season and kind of out of balance for a season and workaholic for a season, that's okay. And typically a spouse is going to come along with you for that. But it's when they notice that that season is now season 2 and season 3 and there was no off season, that's when they're going to start really showing you the legit red light going, look, this wasn't just 90 days like you said it was going to be. We're 20 months into this or 18 months into this, and your behavior is the same. You're coming home with the phone on your head, and even when we're sitting on the couch or checking your email, and it's become part of you. That's where it's like, oh wait, that's the red flag from God saying your business has become an idol and you don't even realize it.
Is this something then that would even work with, hey, I'm in a relationship now, it's on track where we could be getting married, either I am either or husband or possible wife, boyfriend, girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something I need to be really worrying about in those stages? Is it something where I could be more hands-off?
I don't know about you guys, but boyfriend, girlfriend is probably a riskier time because that's when you are giving each other the most attention. After you get married, you kind of back off a little bit and everyone kind of settles into their routines. But when you're dating, there's your girlfriend is really watching, how much attention are you giving me? Are you the kind of guy that I want to be with? And again, business could take you down a path where she gets the feeling that she's going to be competing with that business for the rest of her life. So that's where you have to be really careful to show the balance of, look, the business is important. I want your buy-in. You're going to be just as much a part of this with me. But then she can never sense that she could lose the battle for your attention and your care over a business.
And it's something you were talking about, Scott. You're talking about the importance of communication.
Yeah. Sharing the vision, sharing the vision and why you're doing what you're doing, right? So, and you were talking, Joe, about, 3 months becomes 12 months, becomes 24 months. I always tell people entrepreneurs have to be a little bit crazy because there's constant obstacles that are going to come up, constant things that need your attention. And that's why so few entrepreneurs, percentage-wise, end up being successful. One of the challenges that I've had is, my wife, she's a part of the business, and I love having her as a part of the business because she sees what happens day in and day out. Sharing the vision and where we're going with her, it helps her understand why I'm coming home late, or if there's certain things that need to get done, she understands those things. One of the challenges I faced, and I'm interested to hear, Joe, your take on this, and guys, your take as well, is that when things are frustrating and you're down because it's just, there's ups and downs,
in
right?
the business, you mean?
In the business, right? And there's times where I hesitate to share those things with her because her being my crown, right? And she wants to protect me the same way I protect her. So if I've been wronged, or if someone has done something that isn't right, it upsets her, but at the same token, me sharing that with her. So it really comes down to communication. And then, have you always shared the big struggles?
Heck no. No.
Ooh,
No.
that sounds spicy.
Well, no. No. Well, because to your point, it's a protection mechanism, right? If you as entrepreneurs, when your businesses really start facing the big challenges, if you're like, I have to tell my girlfriend or spouse everything, and we're going to put everything on the table. And look, if she's just as entrepreneurially wired as you, and she's gifted entrepreneurially, sure. If she's not, you're going to burden her. She's not going to sleep because God's given you an ability to process problems and challenges and look for the solution and think of 7 different options. And you move on to solution planning. She's still stuck on, oh my gosh, Cooper, this business is in trouble. So you have to know this person you're with and only give them the information that A, benefits them, and B, allows them to be a better teammate to you. But sometimes in this thing of, oh, let's be great communicators, you could dump on them and burden them to a point where they're like crushed.
And then you're tasked with not only handling the problem, right, but then also reassuring, and even you may not have peace, right, in the situation, and you're trying to provide peace to your spouse on something you don't have peace on. So that then the stress levels and the anxiety can even build on themselves just from that.
So both of you are saying that you have your wives involved in some capacity in your businesses.
My wife has always been involved in every business, typically silent. She wasn't a paid part of the business, but she was either listed as a partner or she had some equity or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first company we're in where she's actually a paid employee. My partner hired her because she has 15 years of experience in an area that we provide services, right? But in all the previous businesses, she wanted to know everything going on. And in some cases, she knew a good amount, but I had to shield her from some of the really ugly stuff going on that I was still working out in my mind. I didn't have a solution. And so, in a typical conversation, if I'm like, I've run into this problem, I've run out of coffee, you're like, well, can I fill your coffee cup? And I'm like, I don't even know if I need more coffee or want more coffee or the coffee could kill me. I'm still trying to figure that out. And you're trying to do your best to serve me, but it's really not serving me because it's messing up my head and my ability to process. That's where you have to know this person and they need to know you and realize that sometimes you're going to just need some quiet time. You just need to like go away and sit in a dungeon to solve the problem. And that's not you ignoring them. That's you processing.
So Cooper and I are both in relationships currently. And I know for myself, I would love if this ends up in a spot where we're married or I'm in a business with her. Would you say you're in the same boat, Cooper?
I think you're in different boats, and here's why.
Oh,
I know who you're dating, right? She can handle 10x the stress you can handle because she's an entrepreneur herself. So God's gifted her and wired her. You could dump anything you want on her, and she'll actually solve the problem for you in like 6 seconds, right? So you have, in that sense, you have an asset, and you guys can have a different communication strategy than maybe my wife and I can have, right? Because her processing power, her gifting is different. My wife's spiritual gift is mercy and service. I can't be going to her with a bunch of leadership and, discernment questions. You know what I mean? But I'm going to guess your gal has more of that leadership discernment muscle. You can leverage her spiritual gifts and talk openly about everything that's freaking you out.
And I know Cooper's girlfriend.
Oh.
And Cooper's girlfriend studying nursing, correct?
Yes.
So nursing, so service, and
Mercy will be one of hers. I'm sure.
Mercy as well. So I would say it's probably a similar situation to you, Joe, in which there's certain things that you might want to shield her from. And that's actually, it brings up a great topic because I think I don't want it to be implied that we're saying, if the house is burning down.
Oh yeah,
that we don't
hide it all. No,
hide it all. And honey, I'm sorry, we haven't talked about this, but
I did mortgage the house. And, no.
I need you to start packing.
It's time to dismount.
No, but I think it's
the movers will be here tomorrow.
Yeah, you know her. She's all in on supporting you. She's super excited about the ventures you're involved in, and so in that sense, you're keeping her updated, integrated. But I think the most important thing, guys, and this is the lesson I've learned, is you've got to do whatever it takes to set the business aside every single day and say, that's it, no more. Yes, there's 15 more phone calls. Yes, there's 8 more emails. Yes, there's a little strategizing I'd love to do in my notepad. But no, I'm just going to stop and just sit on the couch and do nothing to indicate to her that I'm shut down. When I was in my 30s, there was just none of that. I was just all the time on. And she, in many cases, had to sit there in the quiet going, maybe tomorrow we'll get some time together. Maybe next week we'll get some time together. Maybe after church we'll get some time together. But we're driving away from church and I'm still thinking about the business. Like that's where that should be the red flag stuff.
And that is such a real challenge. It's a challenge that I still struggle with. It's because as an entrepreneur, that your brain never really stops there. So that balance, that work-life balance, it's really challenging as an entrepreneur. I mean, I can only imagine, and Cooper, Luke, you guys talk about this as well. I mean, not only are you both pursuing becoming entrepreneurs, right? You're full-time students. Mm-hmm. You both have a significant other, a girlfriend.
You guys are job hunting.
Yeah. I mean, what are some practical ways that you're able to juggle all of that and kind of compartmentalize or shut one area down and focus on another? Do you time block? What are some practical tips that you guys utilize?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we look at scripture, we see the Lord rested on the 7th day. And he could have kept working. He had the ability to keep
unlimited resources.
Unlimited resources and energy, but he still decided to rest on the 7th and use that as a model for us. And so I think that's important as Christians that we take the time to rest, And as husbands, we're called to, Bible commands husbands to love their wives sacrificially. And so there's a huge emphasis on the importance of marriage. And so to me, it seems like as I move towards that, and as I'm in a dating relationship, I need to be thinking, beforehand that, my wife is actually going to be more important than my job and my business, and be able to sacrifice potentially parts of the business in order to be with her and love her as the Bible commands us to.
I like that picture, because think of it this way. We talk about your business is not yours, it's God's, right? He could turn it on, turn it off tomorrow, and you have to hold it loosely. Like if tomorrow God said, you're done, I don't care. But that's not true of you and your spouse, right?
Yeah.
You guys are till death do you part, right? So the focus, the energy, the weight has to be equal in that sense of saying, the business, who cares? Honestly, who cares? Your relationship with your ladies, exponentially more important to God than that stupid thing.
But let's piggyback that. So,
Sure.
question. I'm going to direct this question to you, Luke.
Oh no.
You start a business, right? And
Yep.
you're an entrepreneur. What is your purpose in that?
Well, it depends. First and
What
foremost,
are you hoping
I-
that business accomplishes in your life? Let me rephrase.
I would say I would hope that I'd be able to provide for myself and my family, and then be able to give back to the church.
Boom. So great answer, and that should be the answer. So one of the challenges is being able to shut it down. Is that as in an entrepreneur's mind, and I've talked to a lot of people about this as well, and I've heard similar responses. I'm interested to know if you agree. Is that when I'm working and when I'm sitting on the couch and it's supposed to be time with me and my wife, and there's certain things that I'm doing, everything that I'm doing is not self-serving. I want to give my kids a better life than I had growing up. I want to be able to do noble things and works for the kingdom. I want to be able to, for my wife to be able to live in peace. So the mindset is, I'm working this hard and I'm not shutting it down, but I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it
For the kingdom.
For the kingdom, for my wife. I mean, so there's this way that you can kind of twist it in your mind and not shut it down and totally validate it, because your heart posture is right, but it still doesn't give them what they need relationally.
The picture that comes to mind when you're describing that, one of the businesses we built was a youth sports business, right? Club teams, competitive sports. And that was the same explanation. The same explanation the entrepreneur gives is the same explanation helicopter parents would give us of why they have to be Joey, like, how's Joey's practice and how's Joey doing and why isn't Joey getting playing time, and like, I'm going to take Joey here, I'm going to sign up Joey for that. And what was a very noble thing, raising my kid, right, and providing for them, the kid becomes the idol. And Joey has to go to this tournament, and Joey has to win this, and I need to get, and so many parents I found idolize their kid, and God forbid that Joey's actually the star athlete on the team, then these parents go berserk. Like, they literally become worshipful of that talent, and they lose sight of the fact that Joey is just lent to you for a season. He isn't yours. If you're a true Christ follower, like Joey was just yours for a window of time, and in a few years, Joey's gone. So Joey's not God. You don't get to worship Joey, and you don't get to make Joey an idol to where the more important things fall behind, right? In entrepreneurship, you're absolutely right. We do the same thing. I want to be an entrepreneur to provide. I want to do this. I want to serve the church. And a very noble plan gets thwarted to where the business does become the idol, and you don't even realize it. And I think God would say, and one of the best books I've ever read was Tim Keller's book called Counterfeit Gods, where he kind of gives a very clear definition of what an idol is. And an idol is anything that you would be very upset if you no longer had it. Like you'd lose it. You'd be upset. You couldn't live without it. That's an idol, because it's competing with God. Because the only thing you're supposed to be like, I can't live without, is God, right? So think about it. How often can a business become that? I can't live without the juice. I can't live without the excitement. I can't live. And my identity is tied up in it.
It's also the fear, like the two emotions that drive us most, right? Fear and greed, right? And those are kind of like the two most common drivers for people. So a lot of times, and that's where it's an opportunity to lean into God, because the times when I'm working at night, I don't want to be working at night. I'm working at night because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if I don't do this, then what happens? So then
You're weighing.
I'm saying to myself that I actually control whether or not this business is going to fail. A quick story: when I was in the hospital right before my heart surgery 3 months ago, when that happened, I was, God. You'll either intentionally get alone with God, or God will get you alone with Him.
He'll put you in the bed.
He put me. I was in 3 hospitals in 2 weeks, and 2 of those hospitals, the television didn't work. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my charger. So it was just me, occasional nurses coming in, and God, and that was it. And in that time, God was very clear with me, and He gave me a time. 5:30 was what I kept hearing over and over in my prayer time. 5:30. I didn't know what it meant, and then it was revealed to me. That's when my day shuts down. Every day, I shut it down, and I started asking God. I'm like, well, God, I'm working till 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I still am not even getting close to getting the things I need to get done. But it was a command from God. I stopped at that at 5:30, and the first day I did it, I'm not used to driving home from downtown at that time.
Traffic.
I sat in traffic for an hour and a half, and I'm like, God, why are you doing this? And so I talked to one of my friends from my church about it, and he said, God did something similar to me a couple of years ago. What He wants you to do, He wants you to sit in that traffic, decompress from work, so that when you go home, you're not Ideal Strategic Partner Scott. Your wife's husband, you're the dad. And so that time was time with Him. So instead of getting frustrated about why people are not moving in bumper to bumper traffic, I turn on worship music. I was in prayer. And so it's when we're obedient, God just, and the business grew 30% in that time frame.
That's the assurance we all need to have. I mean, I know this episode is about when is it time to dismount, right? And I know we're spending a lot of time right now on one of the red flags of the many, which is, your spouse, your family, and have I idolized the business to the point where they're sending me signals saying something's wrong, and I'm ignoring it. But I think it is probably the most important one as a Christ follower. Some of the other dashboard indicators like revenue or cash flow or, cost of acquisition or whatever, they're important and you can't ignore them, but like this is the big one. This is the one you're going to give an account for. You're not going to give an account for whether you had 18% profit or 22% profit in 2025.
Would you say you saw this play out in your bloodbath, Joe? I know you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, there were early warning indicators of the bloodbath when my wife was like, are things okay? Like, it's just like, we're not talking much. We're not connecting much. When can we spend some time together? When can we go on date night? Like, if she's having to ask me that, something's very, very wrong. But I was like in go mode. Like, I'm rescuing the business, girl. Like, you have no idea.
If I don't do this, our life changes.
Yeah. Yeah, the warning lights were there. They were originally yellow. Then they turned to red. But I was like, just one more day. Just one more week. I just need one more push, and we're going to push through it. And that combined with some of the other warning lights should have told me, whoa, 5:30. Yeah. And that's it. I was like, no, it's going to be 9 o'clock tonight because we're going to make it work. It's stupid.
Yeah. You're playing God, right? Yeah. I mean, you're playing God.
And you're not trusting God, and you're not being obedient, right? There's all of those things. And what's funny about God, He has a great sense of humor. That's what I love about Him. He'd be like, okay, so that's your plan. Yeah. Okay. All right.
How do you change it?
Go for it. Like a good father, he's just like the prodigal son, right? He was like, okay, here you go. Here's the check. Like, I'll write the check now. If you need it now, I'm giving. And then you just go sit with the pigs for a while, and you're like, dang it. Yeah.
He'll let you just bang your head against the wall until you realize that, that's not the direction.
That's what I'm excited for you guys and all your listeners who are young entrepreneurs. God is going to use entrepreneurship to sanctify you. You're going to learn things about yourself, and 10 years from now, you'll be like, if it wasn't for entrepreneurship, I would have never learned. I would never grown in that area. I would never become this better person, better mentor, better spouse, better dad, whatever. That's the best part of entrepreneurship. The money's great and all that, right? Who you will be in 10 years if you hang in with entrepreneurship will be phenomenal.
Sounds like you'll have to come back in 10 years if you're not paying attention.
Well, we'll be the ones interviewing you.
For our listeners.
All right, guys. Well, that was a great episode. where we had the segment earlier with Joe, Luke, and I, and then just kind of diving deep into the relational aspect of those red flags. So thanks, guys, for that great discussion. We'll catch you all on the next episode of Kingdom Kommerce. See ya.